Thanks for tuning in to another video, you guys. Our channel is primarily just us sharing our adventures and hunting stories, but I had a little bit of an idea for a new series of videos that I'm gonna probably call Campfire Talk, and it's just gonna be some of the past hunting stories, whether it be successful harvests or ones that got away. But quite a few of them might actually be ones that got away, because those are normally the good stories, as we all know. Today, I would like to start off by telling the story of a particular deer, and it has a somber ending to it. It's not exactly like a good ending, I would say. I mean, a lot of the deer that I've shot over the years, I actually haven't kept the antlers. Like, a whole bunch of them are tacked to a tree at a piece of property we have at a lake, but the ones that are down here all have good stories or something that means something, you know what I mean? So it's gonna start off with that guy up there in the top left corner, and these on the floor down here mean something as well. So they're part of the story, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Can you stop attacking the wolf? Can you stop attacking the wolf? I know you like the wolf, but you really gotta stop attacking the ears. No attacking. Okay, so we're gonna start the story off with this deer. I killed this buck in 2015, so it is going back a little bit of time. Unfortunately, he fell off the wall at some point and his nose got broken, and it was more one of the earlier Euros I ever did, and it's not holding up super great. It still has quite a bit of grease in it, but I hung on to him because he's cool. He's got little double droppers and this little extra. Not a big deer, but yeah, nice young buck. But he's not actually the star of the story. He's kind of the downfall of the story, to tell you the truth. So there is another set of antlers down here that play a big component in this story, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So this deer, it was early October. I got this guy on the 6th in 2015. Basically, I had set up a couple of cameras in some really high elevation fur. So think about big, tall ridge, like backing onto more rolling ridges that would climb in elevation all the way up to like sub-alpine or even some alpine. And there's no roads in this area at all. The only way that you can hunt it is hiking. There was some logging on it from like probably like the 50s, like maybe 40s, and all the roads had been long pulled or yanked. There was like one little access point at the bottom. The whole base of the mountain covered in blowdown. It was terrible to walk through every time. But once you got through that, it was like really steep grade, and then there was little slope breaks with benches, and it just went like that, kind of like a set of stairs all the way up this one corner of the face. And it would wrap around into high elevation spruce, so it was just like a wall of impenetrable timber that's like thick spruce timber, and then it would open up into high elevation big mature fir trees, and it had a fair amount of undergrowth in it. The cameras were in there. I had a pretty nice buck on camera. He was like 150s, and I was in there hoping that I might see him. Every time I had been in there before this, so far anyways, it was still early, so I wasn't expecting to see much, but I just like kept poking back in every handful of days that I could go, and I always saw I think that year like a 2-point and a little basket rack and a couple of does, and all the encounters were pretty short-lived until this day. So this day, I worked my way through all that blowdown and hiked all the way up, and I get to basically what I used to call the money zone, and it was just the section of timber on the mountain that you could see the most in and had the most like cover for the deer, but it was strategic for you to hunt it because you could get up above where you could look down on all these benches, and there was a series of folds in the hill, and every time I went in there, there was always lots of bedding sign, but I never saw anything in the beds. It's going on like early to mid-after, or I guess it'd be like early afternoon, probably like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And I'm creeping along the top edge, right as it at the very back of the mountain where it starts to turn into spruce, and I bump a doe. And the doe was bedded, and she wasn't spooked of me too much, and she got up, and she looked kind of alarmed at first, so I use this little call all the time. It's Eastman's Deer Talk call, I think it is. It's really good call. It used to work really well when there was a lot of deer. And I kind of chirped on that thing. It makes like, it's a little elastic band call, but it calmed her down. And I didn't really move, just kind of slowly doing this. And she looked at me for a minute and then turned around and started walking down off the slope break and down the hill through all the big timber to the next bench. And she kind of disappeared out of sight for me because I would have been here on this sort of slope, and then she would have walked like down and off to the left. So I crept up to the edge, and as I'm creeping up, she's just disappearing down the really steep section. And to the left of her, I saw a buck, and it was a freaking hammer, and it was bedded down right at the base of the steep stuff, and it stood up, and all I could see was just the very bits and tips of his tines over the roll. And he stood up, and at that point I could see from like his eyeballs and just his rack, and he was like alerted to the doe moving down the hill, but didn't really know that I was there. But he was just kind of like, he shifted his head once or twice to get this big look at his tips of his rack. And then when he finally, like, I think I moved a little bit to try and get a better look at him, and I couldn't see any of his body, just the top of his head. And then he caught that movement, and like instantly his head snaps straight up and he's looking up at me. And I just remember seeing like huge frame, big heavy tines, like nicely laid out. And what I remember seeing was that it was a 5x7 because he stood there looking at me for like quite a long time. At least that's what I thought he was at that moment. So now I'm like in hyper alert, super freak out mode, you know how it goes. And like I slowly chambered around into my rifle and I tried creeping over the edge. And as I did that, like he just didn't like me moving, and he just turned and like disappeared, like one step and he's gone. I look to the right, the doe is disappearing off to this direction, and this deer then appears, and he was bedded down there on the bench too, and the doe got him up. So this buck is now walking along, doing the head bob through the timber, like to go meet up with the bigger one. And he stops in the wide open, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, he's got like little micro drop tines, like that's pretty cool, but he's not like a big deer, so I want to shoot that other buck. Like it's still early in the season, I didn't really want to shoot this deer. He was giving me a shot, and at this point, like think about me I'm basically like foot on a rock, kneeling, like with my arm around a tree with my gun, and I'm aiming down a face like this through the kind of lower end of what a fir tree would have on it for branches. So it's obstructing like quite a large portion of my view, and I'm just looking through the shit down at these deer. They're about 80 yards away. This deer started moving off to the left, and then before he got into even more open stuff, the really big one kind of trots through where I couldn't shoot him and lined up in front of this buck. So now they're both paralleling me on the bench 80 yards below me, and I can just see them both walking through like all of the sticks that I have through my vision. So I'm like, I have no shot here, I have to move. So I quickly like backed up so they couldn't see me. I crept really quickly up to the next fold in the ridge, and I waited. And to set the scene, I would be looking down the mountain at trees like this big, and there's just like little tiny window, little tiny window, little tiny window, little tiny window, and then every other window that there was had a bunch of stuff in it that you couldn't really shoot through. I mean, I guess you could try, but the odds of success would be like very low. As like I was saying before, there was a bunch of regen in this big timber like down low. So think about huge canopy and then short timber. And these deer like come out of a patch of that, they walk through a chunk of open, I still can't shoot at them. They're coming across and they go into a patch of really thick stuff again. And the very next lane is my best shooting lane. And it's like, the ridge is kind of angling upward down below me. So what I have, if it would have stayed flat, I would have been able to see the entire animals the whole time, but the bench below me is cutting up, so it's coming into everything that's obstructing my view. So the big buck, he is cruising his way through all of this stuff, and he's super dark gray coat, huge freaking gut on him. Like, he's a big mature deer. He's got shoulders, he's got a huge rump, like his neck's already big. He's making this guy look like a dink. And all I'm thinking is, okay, he's in the front. They have like a 15-yard chunk of stuff that comes into the open. And at this point, like, they're already climbing, and I'm losing sight of most of their upper bodies. So all I'm really getting to look at when they come into the shooting window is going to be like the lower 2/3 of their chests, and that's it. I already know they're both bucks. It's October. I can shoot either one of them. So I just knew that the bigger deer was in the front, and they were coming through that chunk of regen, and as they broke into my shooting window, I just watched the big one go in first. There was about a 8 or 10 second period of time that they were in that regen, and I'm thinking he's coming out right away, and I'm just holding guns like on 5 power or something, like on that shooting window, and he came out slightly quartering walking up the hill, and as soon as his front bit of his chest like came into my scope, I let him have it, and I watched it impact him, and I couldn't see his rack at all. Like, it's just 2 bucks came in, 2 bucks came out, and I see the one get absolutely wrecked. I shot him with my 270, like double lunged, he's super dead. He like kicks, and then I watched him like do the really hurt buck run, like maybe 10 yards, and he disappeared over the next slope. And at this point, I'm like freaking out because I just thought I killed an absolute giant. So like all this ambition and stuff of me going for years at this point trying to kill another big one, finally get it done. I'm so excited. And then I just remember like taking time to calm down and figuring out what's going on. I know the deer is more than likely dead. He didn't go into anything too crazy. I just need to go find him. I'm like a little kid on Christmas morning. Like, I just think that I just hit the lotto, like killed a giant timber hunting. And I go walking down right to where I shot him. Instantly, huge blood streak. I'm like, yes, like he's so dead. And I followed it for maybe 10, 12 steps. I looked up, and this was the buck that was laying there. And I just remember seeing the drop tines sticking out of the grass, and I didn't even know what to think. Like, my heart like freaking dropped into my stomach. I felt so sick. And I walked up to this thing at this point really disappointed, and I remember I just like picked his antlers up, looked at him, like it was still a beautiful deer, and then I just kind of dropped his head and I spun around in basically like sickness, looked to my left, and this deer right here was standing 45 yards away from me in the regen, full broadside, just staring at me. And I freaking damn near puked, man. Like, I just remember thinking, like, there's no way that this is happening to me right now. Like, this is a fucking horror story. Like, so yeah, this was the buck that I was looking at up there, and he's standing there just like deadlocked, staring at me, not wanting to move. And my gun was unchambered because I just killed this deer. And I remember I lifted my bolt, closed the bolt, aimed at him, and pulled the trigger. And when it went click, his whole body like shuddered, and he like kind of took a step all hesitant. And the second he took that step, he was all, now he's gonna move. And I watched him do like the slow-mo kind of high bounce thing, like through some big timber and right back into a patch of regen. And I just thought, like, man, like, I won the game, but I fucked up. Like, I shot the wrong deer. And I don't know, at the end of the day, it is quite a bit about the meat, so I was okay with it. Like, that year, my dad was really sick, and he needed meat quite a bit, so I ended up giving most of the deer to my dad, actually, and he put it in his freezer, because he wasn't working, wasn't making money, and dad needed meat, so dad ended up, like, eating most of this deer. So I dropped down to the truck to get my pack because I didn't end up carrying it on the mountain with me. And in that amount of time, like, it probably took me, I don't know, 35 minutes down, 35 minutes back, 40 minutes back up. Like, I had some energy I was giving her. I'm like, I know it's going to be dark at like 7, so I got to move. And it was probably like 1.75 kilometers, maybe 2 kilometers down, and then kind of across a flat to the truck. And I got to the deer at like 5:45. I had him cut up in my bag before like 6:30, I want to say, maybe 6:45. Probably took me about an hour, and he wasn't like the biggest body deer in the world, so it wasn't crazy heavy or anything. But on the way down, like I started walking maybe 10 minutes before it got dark, and I made it through the big stuff to get to where it starts to turn into more blowdown, and I was like starting to go over all this blowdown, and all I was thinking was, man, like all I have is my cell phone light. I don't have a headlamp, and if I go the wrong way, like this is gonna be hell down to the road. So I thought I made the right decision. I did not. It ended up taking me like 2 hours almost to get this deer out, like 1 kilometer and like maybe 1.25 kilometers, because in the bottom I ended up veering too far to the right, and I just went through like waist to chest deep blowdown for probably like 800 meters. It was the worst thing ever. I was trying to like go under and over and slide. I probably fell like 25 times. It sucked. And then I get back out to the road and I just dropped the backpack. So pissed off. I was like, fuck this thing. And then ended up walking all the way back to the truck, got it, and then that was kind of it. But when I got to cell service, because my family was kind of wondering where I was, I called my brother and I told him I shot a buck and had double drop tines. He was stoked. And then he was like, dude, why do you sound so down? And then I told him the story of the 5x7. And that kind of marked our thing for hunting this zone. Like at the time, I don't even think they believed me. I think they just thought that like I shot this thing and I was just bummed that it wasn't big or whatever. I don't know what they thought, but bottom line is later on, the first side of this deer that I found was this side, and I found this 2 years later. So this deer I would have shot on the hill I described, and this deer, this set of sheds, I pulled off a north-facing slope at like 4,600 feet. And it's funny because we used to run cameras on that hill all the time. I had a really cool encounter with a deer on that hill. It's the only buck I've never shot that I regret not shooting. I'll probably tell you that story at some point, but I had this little trail I used to hike up every single time to give me access because it was literally the best way up there. This antler was laying on the back side of a tree that was probably, I don't know, 2 feet in diameter. And, oh, sorry, no, I am totally wrong about this. It was this antler that was laying on the back side of that tree. And this antler was literally tines down, brow tines stuck in the tree, and this much of it was right at the base of one of those trees where the squirrels like had built up a mass amount of pine cone sheddings, and so the whole back side of the shed was completely destroyed. And I looked up some tips on how to fix them. This was an attempt from a long time ago. I don't know if you can see it or not, but when I found it, it had this kicker, which I tried to make. It was actually on an angle like this, and as I let it dry, it sagged, so it ended up turning out like a straight kicker. But this was intact, but it was hollowed out, so when I carried it back to the truck, I snapped it off. So he ended up actually being a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 point, 6x5. I thought it was a 5x7. And when I found this, I was like, no way did I just find this. Like, I thought I'd never see that deer again because I shot at him and then we never got a photo of him, nothing. And this antler was probably like 2.5, 3 kilometers away from where I had the encounter with him. And I knew what deer it was right away because I'd seen him before. Like, I knew it was that buck. So I go running back down after I dealt with the camera stuff and in that spot, and then I tell my brother I found an antler off of him, or the antler off of the buck, and he held it and he's like, dude, you need to go match him up. So the next day, drove back. I gridded that whole mountain for like 6.5 hours and did not find the other side. And I was like, well, to be fair, like, I mean, it's not all the time you can match them up, but normally deer that big, like when they lose one, not like, I wouldn't say more times often than not. I guess in my experience, more times often than not, they don't hang on to the other side for that long. I think it bothers them because it's like makes their head lopsided, so they're trying to knock that thing off. And anyways, day 1 scratch, did not find the other one. Day 2, I start from square one again, thinking, okay, I cruise through all this stuff really quickly. Maybe I gotta go back. Like, I'm gonna go back and try again, but I'm gonna look at this from a systematic approach. Like, I need to bring a GPS, and I'm going to literally grid this mountain like in a pattern to make sure I don't miss anything. And this antler was 80 yards away, maybe 85 yards away. It was actually same elevation, slightly downhill from the first one, and the deer had walked into the middle of a blowdown city, and that was part of my plan for the gridding for the day, hence the GPS, because when you go in a blowdown, you lose your sense of direction. But the buck had walked probably 40 yards into a huge section, like probably a 150 by 300 yard chunk of straight dead jack pine, or pine, and he bedded down, it looked like, in like a little 15-yard opening in that stuff, and this antler was laying smack dab in the middle of it. I looked up and I saw the 5 sticking out of the grass. It was tines up, and I was like, no way. I was so stoked that I found it. Only had the one with me, so I drove back home and I put them together, and I was like, there he is. And he actually sat exactly like this, and that's why I said when I first saw him, like, it was just a big wall of tines like splayed out, because he was a really nice buck. Like, it's not too often you see mule deer with big brows like that, but I'll give you the turn of him here. Like, he is a beautiful deer. He's super heavy all the way through. He's got super character, really nice, like, forked overall, stupidly heavy, and these antlers are like very dense. Like, they're probably one of the heavier ones I think I have in my collection, but just because of the history and the story with the little drop time buck and this guy, this is definitely my favorite set of sheds in my collection, just because it was the big one that got away. And I got to actually bring the antlers home with me, which is cool. Never killed them, and never got another photo or found another shed off of them. So I guess it's a lot of luck involved with that one, but nonetheless, I think that was a pretty cool story, and I hope you guys enjoyed, because I think I'm going to do some more of these. I got a lot of hunting stories, and some of them are pretty entertaining. So if you like the story of the double dropper buck, the episode 1 of Campfire Talk, please leave a like and subscribe. We like telling stories here, whether it be this or actual video from out hunting. This is what we love to do, and I love to share. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. Good luck out there.